Well, kia ora everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Sky Sport News. This is, as most of the world is doing right now, over Zoom, as always. I'm delighted to have Del Woodford with me to talk all things Tour de France. It, of course, starts tomorrow night, and that one is on Sky Sport. Del, first of all, what are you expecting? I mean, this is a Tour de France really like no other.
Yeah, absolutely, Henry. It is. I guess we're going into the total unknown. Normally you come into a Tour de France with such a massive build-up. You start in January with the Tour Down Under, and then you have the classics. We would have had Liège-Bastogne-Liège as the last classic, the national championships, which of course they have had. But we would have had this whole season of classics. It was this year we've crammed in, Strade Bianche, Milan-San Remo, etc. We haven't had the classics, and now we're at Tour de France. It's sort of like it's almost snuck up on us, and in such a condensed season, I don't know what to expect. I really don't.
Yeah, and I feel the same. There's so many unknowns. We don't know really true form from a lot of the riders, and we don't even know first and foremost whether it's actually going to last 3 weeks with the COVID situation that's developing quite strongly over there.
Yeah, and it seems to be a little bit. Now that we've got 8 riders on a team, 30 staff, so 38 in their little bubbles and trying to operate. We've had 2 leave the race already from Lotto. Fortunately they're staff, not riders. At this stage, if you lose some riders, it'll be very hard to get someone there in time for the start of the bike race. They've only got 8-man teams, so that's going to be tough in itself for over 3 weeks. And, managing, I think the stress of the race itself is always a level above every other race in the world. But with the COVID situation on top of that, will the race get to Paris? That's, I think a lot of people are really wondering that, really doubting the race's ability to go that far. It's also a really long, hard tour. In normal conditions, almost 3,500 kilometres, in the 21 days. So often the tour's around 3,200 kilometres, 35, nearly 3,600 kilometres. It's not an easy tour as well. So that takes its toll on top of what else the teams are dealing with.
And assuming we do get to Paris, of course, the big battle that everyone is talking about is Ineos versus Jumbo-Visma. And it's a blockbuster battle, it really is. Egan Bernal versus Primoz Roglic. I mean, what are you expecting from this huge matchup?
Wow, it's going to be interesting to see who takes control of the race and when. I think it's a tour that you don't want to take the yellow jersey too early. Of course, your sponsor wants it to take it straight away, but then you've got the responsibility of trying to defend it. Tactics are going to be really interesting. Over the years, we've seen Sky, now it's gone into Ineos, their style of riding, full gas into the mountains, big line up, and they've had the power and numbers on the mountains to really control and dominate the race. Jumbo-Visma have been riding that same sort of style in the races we've seen so far. They've put the team on the front, they've controlled the race, but this is a 3-week race, and it's hard to do that. So which team's going to try and do that? How they're going to try and counter-attack each other, how they're going to try and cancel each other out, it's going to be quite interesting. I think at the moment, Jumbo-Visma have got the upper hand, certainly on the form sheet, the way they've raced to date. And I think with Ineos, they've lost, the defending, well, they've got the defending champion, but Chris Froome's not there. Geraint Thomas isn't there. Geraint Thomas, I thought, was a really big call to leave out. He rides, I think, with his heart on his sleeve, he rides without an agenda, and I think he'll be, even though he was slightly out of form in the Criterium Dauphiné, I thought he would still make the start list. So
yeah, and when we're talking about Jumbo-Visma, obviously Primoz Roglic is their main man, and we still don't know how he's backed up from that crash he had at Criterium de Dauphiné. But the one I wanted to talk to you about as well was, who's going under the radar a bit, I think. It's Tom Dumoulin from that Jumbo-Visma. He seems to be building quite nicely, and if Roglic perhaps isn't 100%, I think the Dutchman is a good chance of coming to the fore for Jumbo-Visma.
And that could be one of the battles within the team, actually, because Dutch team, Dutch rider, if Tom Dumoulin, we know what he can do, we know what he's capable of, even though he's been off the bike up until recently, 400 days, a year pretty much off the bike. His form is building, as you say, Henry, it's building really nicely. He's looked really strong, really comfortable in all his races. I think he's been flying under the radar. And he'll be a really big threat, I think, in the race. We know he can climb. There's only one little short time trial, 36 kilometres, right at the end of the bike race that finishes up the mountain. So it's not going to be a big factor. But Dumoulin will be really dangerous, particularly if he gets away on a breakaway. So in that first week or the second week of the Tour, 20 riders sneak up the road. Dumoulin's in there, perfect for Jumbo-Visma. They can just sit back, and then you've got your Tour winner sit already up there. But I think the Dutch will be wanting Tom Dumoulin to do really well in this race. And that's something that worries me a little bit about their team tactics. What will come out of it? If Roglic is a little bit, he's not, he's their number one man, but Dumoulin's not far away. How's the team going to function? We haven't seen them under that type of pressure yet.
And of course, one of the key men for both Dumoulin and Roglic will be the Kiwi George Bennett, who's been in really good form since the restarts got back underway. He'll be back in his sort of super domestique role for Jumbo in this one. What are you expecting from him, and what have you made of his form so far?
Oh, he's come back like he's on fire. He's riding. It's a different George, if you like, the way he's riding. If you look at the race, the way he rode in Italy, those two great rides. A winning and then backing it up with the second place and one of the monuments of the sport. He's riding really aggressively. He's riding, I think, in bigger gears on the climbs, and I've seen him in the past. He looks really confident. He's got a lot of experience now. I hope they don't burn him up like they did, last time and send him back for water bottles at the wrong time. He could be a real threat. Like, let's face it, he could be leading another team in this Tour and be a real overall contender. So I'm hoping that they, a little bit like Dumoulin, they play it smart with George. They're going to have to use him on the climbs, but I hope they don't burn him up unnecessarily before those climbs. And, if he's there, if they've got two of them there or three of them there, they're in a really good position. That's the position you want to be in. So I think he's going to be absolutely vital one way or another for Jumbo-Visma to win this Tour. George is going to play a massive part, a bigger role than we've ever seen him play before, because he's going so well, and he's just a pure climber.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we saw how well he worked with Roglic during the Tour de l'Ain when he led him to victory. He was at the front of most of those climbs. He was setting the pace. He was setting the tempo. So, yeah, I think if Jumbo-Visma at a win, it's going to be, a lot of it is going to be down to George. And for us Kiwi fans, that should be great, because we should be seeing a lot of him on those mountain stages.
We will, and it's going to be interesting on those mountains as well. We have to wait a little while. I think there's a little bit of a hill climb on stage 4 to finish. We'll say a little bit of a hill climb is probably 7 or 8K. Its average is 7.5%, so far too big for most normal people. But for those guys, it won't be a problem. It's not going to be till a little bit later in the race. I think that 15, 16, 17, 18 stages, they're going to be the ones that worry the teams right now, going into the first 10 days of the Tour, where there's a lot of nervousness. People want results really quickly, a lot of pressure. Looking after your riders, Henry, in that week, in that first week, whether it's, George, whether it's Roglic, whether, your Bignell, all those GC riders have to survive and stay upright and stay out of trouble and have a lot of things go their way in that first week before we get to the later part of the Tour. So that in itself is really stressful on the riders also.
And if we're sticking with the Kiwi theme as well, we've got two other New Zealanders at Mitchelton-Scott, the Australian team, and Sam Bewley and Jack Bauer. We sort of know their roles. Obviously, Sam's normally tasked with pulling some big turns at the front and protecting them on the flats. Jack, though, is a guy that always interests me, because he was so agonizingly close to that stage victory a few years ago, and he always seems to, dabble in a breakaway or two. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to produce.
I'm really looking forward to what they'll both do on the Tour. It's so great to see Sam Bewley, after so many years riding at the highest level of the sport, all those Grand Tours, all those laps around Spain and Italy, to finally be able to do one around France. So let's hope the race goes its full distance. He's going to be really vital. He will play that role, that team captain role on the road. He will be there doing the donkey work on the flat, the hard stages, looking after, they've got Yates, will be a bit of a contender in this race for sure. Chavez as well, I think, is riding. So we know he can go uphill as well. But I think they'll use Jack to do some of that work, but also look at opportunities for him in stages. There's a lot of stages in this Tour that could suit him. The lumps are in the middle, flattens out towards the end. there will be some breakaways in this race because it's going to be hard to control with 8-man teams, and that no team will. I don't think any team's 100% sure of their form going into it. So I think we'll see breaks go away and things. And I would love to see Jack Bauer not go agonisingly close, but win a stage. And, wouldn't it be great this year with those guys riding? George is capable in the mountains. Sam certainly in a breakaway, and Jack as well. So, they do have opportunities. Just let's hope the dice rolls their way for a change.
Absolutely. And before we go, I guess we should touch on the French hopes, because that's always a big talking point, especially for the locals watching the race, obviously. And again, it sort of rests on Thibaut Pinot. I think Romain Bardet is more focusing on stage wins than the GC this year. Pinot is always a bit enigmatic, and you never really know what you're going to get. He's had some really bad luck in the past. How do you think he's going to fare in this race?
Wow, yeah, he's a lot. I don't know. I really don't know how he'll feel. Your summary of him is absolutely perfect. He looks like he's the goods, and then he gets injured or has some bad luck or something goes wrong. We know he's aggressive on the climbs. He might have to control the aggression. He doesn't have a super team around him, so he'll be looking to ride off other teams, other riders. But, the French are there. They've also got Alaphilippe, who, even though he says he's only there to chase stages and that, he's going to be aggressive in the mountains. He's dangerous. You can't let him get away. You can't give the guy, 5 minutes in a breakaway, because then, it's a lot of time to pull back. Bardet, I think he's a very good climber, Bardet. I wouldn't read too much into he's just going for stage wins. He will ride off the other teams as much as possible. I think he'll be looking for stage wins if he has a bad moment in the race, loses a lot of time in the first 10, 15 days of the race, and then look at his opportunities in the mountains to go on a long break, chase the King of the Mountains jersey. I think that's where we might see Bardet. I wouldn't write him off totally for the French, but I think, Thibaut Pinot, Alaphilippe had a fantastic race last year. And again, with the same sort of team structure. So I think they're going to go into this with a reasonable amount of confidence for the French. They're not going to win the Tour, but, they'll be hoping. And Thibaut Pinot will be the one they would pin all their hopes on to win the Tour.
Exactly, and he's always good to watch. Pinot, he's always animating the race. He's always making things happen. And just finally, before we go, the tough one, I know, but prediction: if we do make it through the 3 weeks, who's going to be wearing yellow on that final stage?
Yeah, it's always tough calling at this stage, isn't it? But I think for me, oddly enough, I quite like Tom Dumoulin. I think, he's got a lot of opportunity in this race probably, and could go, be the surprise package, depending how Visma go. I guess you go into the race, defending champion, I think he just about always starts as favourite though.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to agree with you. I think it's going to come from Jumbo-Visma, but I think Roglic has enough to get this one done, providing he's recovered okay from that crash. But I think with the support around him, with Bennett, Sepkus, it's Dumoulin, it's such a strong team. And we've seen him outkick Bernal, earlier this year as well. So I think he's he's probably got a little bit more explosive power, but whether he can last the whole 3 weeks will be another question.
Yeah, no, that's right. That finish of his is something else. It's like Geraint Thomas. He's got that speed. He's got that kick at the end of the climb to take 20 seconds out of you, 15 seconds out of you. So that can be really vital in the Tour de France. There's a lot of other riders. I look at Nairo Quintana's in there. You've got Dan Martin. You've got Carapaz. You've got Sikroff. So Ineos aren't going on there with a one-man wonder as well. They've got some pretty good riders around them that they could play during the race. So I think we're going to see a really exciting race on a lot of fronts, Henry. We're all anticipating that how will they get through 3 weeks of racing without 2 positives, I think they've said, for COVID, and the team has to pull out of the race. How will they review that? What's going to happen throughout the race? So just hope it goes smoothly. Looking forward to seeing some absolutely fantastic cycling on Sky Sports.
Absolutely, and it all gets underway Saturday night, that one at 11:50, so it's a late night as usual for that one. Sky Sport 3, and of course they'll have all the live coverage, the highlights, the last 2 hours, all that sort of stuff throughout the tour as well. So thanks very much for your time, Del, and everyone look forward to the Tour de France.